Number 5. Island of the Dolls. The Island of the Dolls is a peculiar small island just off the coast south of Mexico City. The island is covered, well, absolutely blanketed in hanging dolls. Just about everywhere on the small landmass. I probably don't even need to really delve into any of the lore behind this island for you to believe that it's cursed. You can just take a look at it and understand. I mean, it's a secluded, abandoned island inhabited exclusively by dilapidated dolls. What do you need? Don Julian Santana Barrera was a man who had isolated himself from the rest of Mexico City, choosing instead to live alone on this small, meager island. His world would be thrown upside down when he discovered a body laying on the shore one day. Shortly following the discovery, a doll washed up on shore as well, having come in from the channel. This event would change Barrera's life forever. Barrera hung the doll up on the island, believing that this would appease the spirit of the girl and set her free. Well, either it didn't work, or he believed he needed a bit of extra protection, because for the rest of his life, Barrera made it his mission to hang as many dolls as he could across the island, scavenging them from the channel, some from the trash, wherever he could find them, until the island's reputation preceded it. And what was once a small, private residence became the infamous Island of the Dolls. Barrera's story would be cut short in 2001, when his body was discovered in the channel floating, just like the doll all those years ago. But his legacy far from ended there. The island has become a notorious tourist destination, only attainable by a boat out of Mexico City. While most guides are happy to take you, there are some who outright refuse the journey for fear of spirits. It's said that if you are to visit, it's best to bring a doll, to appease whoever could still be living there. Ugh. I kinda ran a tingle down my spine, and that's just number 5. Now if you want more stories like that, we have them coming every single day, hot and fresh. All you've got to do is subscribe and creep on creeping on. Let's keep going.
Number 4 on this list is the Firkins house. The Firkins house is part of Fort Edmonton Park, which, you guessed it, is located in Edmonton, Alberta. Fort Edmonton Park is a little tourist attraction that has buildings from 1885, 1905, and 1920 to represent the homes of the time. One of the houses is the Firkins house. This home is interesting because during my research, I couldn't find any particular evidence of wrongdoings or tragic events at this home. In fact, for the most part, it seems like a pretty normal house. People have lived there before and no harm has befell them, but it seems that after they moved out and the home was donated, that's when things started to go a little bit haywire. There are reportedly 3 ghosts or demons that haunt this home, each one scarier and more dangerous than the next. The first one is the ghost of a beautiful floating woman who is dressed in all white. People have said that they've spotted her in the windows of the home looking out at them or slowly drifting throughout the living room. The second one is the ghost of a little boy. The boy will appear to certain people looking extremely ill. It is currently unknown if this boy died in and around the area or what disease he is suffering from, but it is said that he resides in the home with the woman in white. The third being is by far the scariest of all 3. A ventriloquist dummy that will appear in the home or in the cupboards. This thing can move all by itself and talk by itself. It is very similar to the popular horror franchise Chucky, and it's said by some to be seeking to harm the living. I'm not sure if the ghost of the ventriloquist has taken over this dummy or if the dummy has taken on its own persona, but I definitely do not want to go anywhere where the primary residence is a demon puppet.
Number 3. Eastern State Penitentiary, Philadelphia. Now, some of the wisest men I've ever met have said that it's always sunny in Philadelphia. But if you were one of the doomed souls interred into Eastern State Penitentiary, it was anything but. Eastern State wanted to run things a little differently than the standard American prison system, dubbing their system of punishment the Pennsylvania system, or whack and use John's Philly style, depending on who was asking at the time. The Pennsylvania system refers to imposing the prisoners to solitary confinement all the time. Prisoners lived alone, exercised alone, ate alone, and were only ever accompanied by guards. When being escorted anywhere, the guards would put a black hood over inmates. Unsurprisingly, this was not a terribly popular system. It eventually collapsed inward on itself due to overcrowding, and the program was abandoned in 1913, just 5 years after the prison was constructed. Although this didn't really do much to improve conditions for the inmates there, and really just led the prison to come up with new terrible creative methods of inhumane treatment, such as chaining prisoners' tongues to their wrists, or strapping prisoners to chairs for days on end, dousing prisoners in freezing cold water, and putting the worst prisoners into a pit affectionately dubbed the Hole, where they'd be kept in the dark for weeks at a time. In 1970, after decades of terror, Eastern State closed its gates only to creak them back open as a tourist destination for dark tourists looking to go ghost hunting. A place like this is bound to be home to all sorts of rumors and spirits, right? Well, according to local legends, if you spend a night in Eastern State on one of their Halloween tours, you'll hear all kinds of disembodied laughter, screaming and crying, ghostly figures moving across the walls, and unexplained footsteps. Enjoy the sights. Just make sure the gate doesn't lock behind you. And while we're still on this one, does anybody else think that this could stand to be the best premise for an episode of Always Sunny, like, ever? The gang goes to jail, the gang gets haunted. If anybody knows Danny DeVito's agent, please DM us. Number 2, the Hellfire Club. Don't get too excited. The party won't be meeting Eddie Munson for a D&D session anytime soon at this Hellfire Club. The Hellfire Club in Dublin, otherwise known as Montpelier Hill, was once home to a hunting lodge in the 17th century, owned by one Richard Parsons, a man obsessed with black magic and the occult. It's said that the Hellfire Club was a club for Satanists, as the leader was referred to as the King of Hell and would dress like the devil himself during meetings. Every meeting of the Hellfire Club, they left one seat open at the table, just in case Lucifer wanted to drop by. Stories go on to say that members of the Hellfire Club participated in all manner of dark and sinister ritual, sacrificing cats, goats, and if the legends are to be believed, even servants of the Hellfire Club themselves were offered. Legend has it that one fateful day, a strange man appeared in the middle of the night and asked if he could join in at the card game that they were playing for the night. As there was always an open seat, they decided to offer it to him. During the game, a player dropped his cards, and when he went underneath the table to retrieve his hand, they saw that the strange man they had invited had hooves in place of feet, and upon rising from the table, the stranger had vanished into a burst of flame. The building was scorched and set ablaze in 1750, with many differing accounts as to what caused the flame. Some say it was the club itself that set the building on fire to give a more intimidating appearance and keep out outsiders. Some say the devil himself did it, and some say it was a duel that ended badly. Whatever the cause, the Hellfire Club relocated their activities sometime in 1760, and the original building is left empty, where it still stands today. You can visit it today, and it's a fairly popular tourist destination for urban explorers and paranormal investigators who want to see if maybe there's any residual black magic in the soil and walls there. Number 1, Poveglia. This list really has me all kinds of freaked out, reading about all these wretched places. I think we need to focus on a nice island getaway. Why not the island of Poveglia? The forbidden island off the coast of Venice. I knew it was going to be haunted. I wrote this list. Poveglia is an infamous island in Italian history, once serving as a quarantine zone and final resting place for the unfortunate victims of the Black Plague. As the plague ravaged Europe and paranoia set in across the lands, it was said that anyone who showed so much as the slightest symptoms were shipped off to Poveglia to live out the rest of their days. Oftentimes, these people would be sent away without even truly being sick, dooming them to a horrific fate. It's said that over 50% of the island's soil is made of burned human ash. That is terrifying. The ground itself is haunted. In the early 19th century, the island was converted from a quarantine zone to a just as terrifying mental asylum, switching gears a little bit because apparently being host to one setting for a horror movie wasn't quite enough. The asylum did nothing to improve Poveglia's haunted reputation. Instead of being home to the sick now, it was the home to droves of mentally disturbed patients who were made into unsuspecting victims by a doctor's experiments. Doctors at the asylum would impose their patients into lobotomies with no concern for sanitation or the victim's safety. The legend has it that the lead doctor at the asylum, who ran these twisted experiments, was so haunted by the spirits of his former patients that it drove him to such madness he cast himself over the tower of the island where his screams can still be heard. It's been said the island is home to countless tortured abandoned souls, still screaming. Now, if for some reason I told you all of that and you're thinking, I really want to visit, first of all, why? And second of all, you're gonna need to be pretty crafty, as the island is completely forbidden. You'll be pressed to the fullest extent of the law if you're caught trespassing into Poveglia. Not even remotely worth the risk, if you ask me. At best, you get arrested. At worst, I got no idea.
In at number 5 we have James Bay Inn in Victoria, British Columbia. The James Bay Inn opened in 1911 and is the third oldest hotel in Victoria. The hotel has continued to operate, only closing briefly during the war. The hotel was built so that every room has a view outside and access to fresh air. This was the most important thing to the architects. The hotel bought enough land that there was nothing blocking guests' view. In 1942, the hotel was purchased by the Mother Cecilia's religious order from From then until 1945, the hotel was run as St. Mary's Priory. During this time, the building had its most famous visitor, the Canadian painter Emily Carr. The Canadian painter Emily Carr was a patient at the Priory during her illness. It was here that she spent her final days and finally succumbed to her illness. Many believe that her spirit did not pass on. It could have been that she has unfinished business, a painting she had yet to finish. In the final days before she died, she was made aware she was to be awarded an achievement for her life's work, an award she did not live to see. The room that was used for the sick in 1945 has since been refurbished a number of times. It is now a men's room leading off from the pub. It is believed that her spirit is unhappy that where she had her final moments has been turned into a restroom. There are reports that she likes to play around with the ghost. She will call the phones in the rooms at night. When answered, no one is there. She has also been seen to appear at the end of the beds watching people sleep at night. She was also once seen in a mirror of the washroom. The scared guest told others, but no one else saw her on investigation.
Number 4. The Stanley Hotel. Who doesn't love a nice stay at a good hotel, you know? Someone to tend to your needs, breakfast ready for you wake up, and a TV where you'll flick through the channels for half an hour before settling on Ghostbusters 2 because that's the only thing that's on. Let me introduce you to the Stanley Hotel, one of America's most beautiful resorts. Built in 1909 next to the picturesque Rocky Mountains in Colorado, the Stanley Hotel is a great place to get away from it all. It's isolated away from the rest of the world, and if you're starting to wonder why this hotel seems a bit familiar to you, maybe if I called it the Overlook Hotel, it might come together? Yeah, the Stanley Hotel is the original inspiration for the Overlook Hotel from The Shining. Stephen King found the inspiration for his famous haunted hotel after spending a cursed night in room 217, the haunted room from the novel. Amusingly, while the Stanley Hotel served as the actor of sorts for the Overlook in the TV series, it didn't for Stanley Kubrick's legendary adaptation. In that, the hotel standing in for the Overlook asked that room 217 not be used in the film, as it was a real operating room and the hotel was afraid it would lose business, so they changed it to the non-existent room 237 for the legendary Kubrick picture. Now, I could do IMDb trivia about Stanley Kubrick movies all day. What makes the Stanley Hotel so scary? Well, it goes without saying that it's said to be a haunted hotel. All manners of hauntings have been reported. Eerie laughter, unexplained noises, ghostly apparition, things moving on their own, and so forth. Now, the Stanley Hotel embraces its status as a haunted hotel with gleeful open arms. Ghost hunters are invited to stay in their spirited rooms that are purported to have higher levels of supernatural activity. Unsurprisingly, these are the most booked rooms in the entire hotel. Stephen King recounts that the direct events that inspired The Shining was that while he was visiting the hotel, he was terribly afraid of its isolation and its eeriness, describing eating alone in its giant dining hall, hearing quiet orchestral music played over the speakers in a room distant. Apparently, staying there gave him terrible nightmares of his son being chased by some invisible presence. He says as soon as he woke up from the first one, he lit a cigarette and began to write The Shining then and there. Now, my advice for you if you ever take a trip to the Stanley Hotel, make sure you got lots and lots to keep yourself busy with, but make sure you get some time to play. You know what they say about all work and no play, right?
In at number 3 we have the Fairmont Chateau Laurier in Ottawa. The Fairmont Chateau was originally commissioned to be built in the early 1900s by Charles Melville Hayes. Charles was the president of the Grand Trunk Railway. He began his career with the company when he was just 17 as a clerk. He soon worked his way up the ranks within the company. It was his idea to build a transcontinental railroad within Canada from Moncton to British Columbia. He was an ambitious man but often promised more than he could actually achieve. This often led him to upsetting people and causing repercussions for his company. He was even called heartless, cruel and tyrannical by one member of the parliament. His hotel was due to open in 1912 after he returned to Canada after a short trip to London to sort out some of his business problems. The gala opening for his hotel was planned for April 25th. That's my sister's birthday. Just so you all know. He bought a ticket to travel back on the 10th of April after hearing his daughter back home was struggling with her pregnancy. He was due to arrive in New York on April 17th in order to make the gala. Unfortunately, Charles along with his wife and staff were on board the RMS Titanic. Charles is said to have helped the woman in his family safely get to the boats, but he himself would not make the trip. He was brought back to Canada to be laid to rest. His hotel did open after a amount of time to mourn his passing. Although he was not there when the hotel opened, it is rumoured his spirit still remains within the walls. doors. Likely his spirit felt it had some unfinished business, having died so suddenly and tragically. One visitor from 2008 stated that the hotel was definitely haunted. She claimed her floor in particular was haunted, and she felt incredibly scared during her visit. Taps would turn themselves on mysteriously, as well as footsteps in the hallway. She did also state it would not stop her from visiting again though. Maybe the beautiful castle is worth a scare. In at number 2 we have the Banff Springs Hotel in Alberta. The Fairmont Banff Springs, formerly known as the Banff Springs Hotel, is a historic hotel in Banff, Alberta. William Cornelius Van Horn, another founder of the railroad, had the idea to build a hotel on the land. When construction began of the railroad in this area, they stumbled across several mineral springs. Seeing the great opportunity, William commissioned a grand hotel be built at the location. Construction started and they relied heavily on Chateau-esque style architecture for inspiration. After 2 years of construction, the Banff Springs Hotel opened its doors in 1886. Quickly became known as one of the top 3 mountain resorts in North America. Its great reputation stands to this day. It has hosted historical figures such as King George VI and his wife Queen Elizabeth. The hotel is now open for over 130 years. A lot of guests have visited in that time, and it is believed that not all of them may have left. One story that has always been told between guests is one of the ghost bride. The story goes that her and her fiance had booked in for a lavish wedding at the hotel. They had their entire family booked into the hotel, and it was looking to be a beautiful celebration of their love. On the morning of their wedding, she got into her dress and prepared herself for the big day. Unknowing to her, what came next was tragic. She wanted to make an entrance into the wedding and decided to descend down one of the marble staircases. She slipped on her dress and frantically reached for something to stop her. She fell a great height to the bottom of the stairs, in front of all the guests and her fiance. They watched in horror, unable to do anything. They rushed to her aid, but it was too late. She was already gone. The wedding party had to leave the hotel and attempt to move on from the tragedy, but the bride could not. Her soul was trapped inside of the hotel. It is said she now spends her days walking down the same staircase, hoping to reach the bottom and greet her loved ones, but she never will. This is a common sighting for guests of the hotel. You can feel a chill run down you if you walk those steps today. Some guests have even heard crying echoes across the marble floors, unable to see what might be causing it. Maybe one day she will find peace in the afterlife, but right now she continues to haunt the halls of the hotel. And finally, in at number 1 we have the Fort Garry Hotel in Winnipeg. The Fort Garry Hotel is located in downtown Winnipeg. It opened for the first time on December 11, 1913, and once again has links to the railway. It's one of many hotels owned by Canada's Grand Railway Hotel. It has been designated as a National Historic Site of Canada due to its long history. Any hotel that has been open as long as this one is bound to have some ghosts sticking around. The most haunted room in the hotel seems to be room 202. Many years ago, a woman and her husband checked into the hotel for their visit to Winnipeg. It is said that the husband had left to run an errand, leaving his wife at the hotel for a short time. When he didn't return for hours, the wife became worried. She then got a call from the police that he had been involved in a car accident. He did not survive the crash. Stricken with grief, the woman spent many days in the room locked away. She then decided to take her own life as she could not go on without her husband. Since then, the room is said to hold her angry spirit. Both staff and guests have made similar reports of seeing blood dripping from the walls. One woman claimed that during her stay in the room she was awoken twice by the feeling of someone getting into bed with her. The ghost is not only confined to the room, others have seen her in the hotel lounge, sat in a corner dressed in all black, crying over her lost love. She is not the only ghost at the Fort Garry Hotel though, simply the only one who can be identified. There are also reports of a man. He has been seen at the foot of guests' bed while they sleep. When they awake to confront the intruder, he disappears. One employee once entered the dining hall and saw a man sat at one of the tables. He called to the man that he would have to leave. He went to get help, but when he returned, the man was gone.
Number 5 on this list is Tranquille Sanatorium in British Columbia. Tranquille Sanatorium has quite an extensive and tragic history to it, which has caused its walls to be the home to many undead spirits. A sanatorium, if you weren't familiar, is an establishment which has the sole purpose of housing those with long-term illnesses and is often associated with tuberculosis. The one that we're talking about right now is no different. It was built in 1907 as a facility to treat people with tuberculosis. However, it didn't stay like this for very long. The purpose of the facility eventually changed to become an insane asylum. It acted as this mental institute for a while until finally becoming abandoned in the late 1980s. Due to its deep history with death, disease, mental illness, it's no wonder that the Tranquille Sanatorium is now deeply haunted. The layout of this facility screams something out of a Stephen King book. It has several buildings that are connected by poorly lit underground tunnels. The building itself looks all too eerie from the outside as well, with dirty cream colored walls that have seen far better days, as as rot and mold slowly devour them. Visitors of this place report feeling extremely uneasy. A common note for most people that visit is the presence of orbs, strange balls of light that flutter throughout the building and then disappear. Some people have reported seeing a ghostly apparition on the 6th floor. This ghost takes the form of a woman not older than 30. She appears to be crying and screaming. The tunnels are said to be particularly haunted. People have reported screams coming from nowhere, flashes of movement, menacing and animalistic groans that make you feel as if somebody is right behind you. Children can also be heard playing every now and again in some of the more open areas of the building. Clearly, this place's dark history has impacted it greatly, and just because physical humans decided to abandon it in the 80s doesn't mean that it was truly abandoned for good.
In at number 4 we have Fairmont Royal York in Toronto. Opened in 1929 by Canadian Pacific Hotels, the Fairmont Royal York in Toronto has been a member of historic hotels worldwide since 2017. When it first opened, the hotel was the tallest structure in the entire British Empire. Within a year, the demand for the hotel grew so much the hotel already had its first renovations to add more rooms. Like most other hotels around that time, the hotel was designed as a chateau and Art Deco style architecture. This hotel has also hosted royal family members King George IV and Queen Elizabeth during their royal visit to Canada. The hotel is believed to have at least 4 ghosts who like to walk the halls of the historic hotel. An author named John Robert Colombo wrote the book Mysteries of Ontario. In the book, he mentioned a ghost that he came across during his stay at the Fairmont Hotel. According to the book, he saw an apparition of a man. He said he was a grey-haired man in a maroon jacket. He saw the man in the hallway of the 8th floor. Others have also reported seeing the man in different areas of the hotel. There is another story about a young woman who used to work at the hotel. The former employee once went missing during her shift. When she was finally found, it was too late. The woman had taken her life and was hanging from the stairwell railing above the 19th floor. The reason why she did this was never discovered. Since then, staff have heard strange scrapings and screams coming from that area of the hotel. If anyone dares to investigate the noises, they stop. Guests have also come into contact with her ghost on the 8th floor, claiming they felt the presence of someone, like they were being followed. As mentioned before, there are believed to be more ghosts in the hotel. The hotel is so grand in size that hauntings have occurred randomly over many floors. One electrician claimed he often feels cold spots when working on the hotel with no reason as to why.
Number 3 on this list is the Five Fishermen Restaurant. This is a restaurant in Halifax, Nova Scotia, known for its exceptional oysters and also its ghostly inhabitants. The ground that this restaurant sits on wasn't always utilized for serving up fish and chips though. In fact, it has a very long history. In the early 1800s is when the building went up, and for a long time it acted as the town's only school. Nothing ghoulish or demonic about that. However, at around the turn of the century, the school moved and the building took on a new purpose. It became the mortuary for Halifax and made its dealings with the dead. Now, not every mortuary is going to become haunted, but this one had quite a lot to deal with over the years. In 1912, the unsinkable ship, the Titanic, sunk. It sunk roughly 640 kilometers off of the eastern shores of Canada, and therefore the closest places to assist with the rescue was these eastern provinces. Halifax acted as the leader in these rescue processes, and because of that, the mortuary had an onslaught of bodies of people whom had died on the ship. 5 years after that tragedy, Halifax incurred one of their own with the massive Halifax explosion. This was where a munitions ship exploded and it killed roughly 2,000 people just like that. This mortuary served as the primary designation for both of these incidents, and due to the unnatural deaths here, it makes sense that some spirits have clung on. Guests and employees alike have reported seeing ghosts all over this mortuary that turned restaurant. One of the dishwashers reported running out of the restaurant when he looked up from what he was doing and was staring directly at a ghost-like specter. The restaurant has attempted to have serious renovations done. However, I don't think that any amount of structural change will get these spirits to rest for good. Number 2 on this list is the Frank Slide. Now, even though the Frank Slide sounds like it could be a fun, popular dance move that takes over TikTok for a few weeks, it is far more morbid than that. On April 29th in 1903, in the mining town of Frank, which at that time was part of the Northwest Territories, but it is now a section of Alberta, there was a horrible tragedy. 110 million tons of limestone and rock came tumbling down in one of Canada's biggest landslides ever. This fell onto to part of the town of Frank. Frank was located right next to Turtle Mountain, which after extensive mining had grown unstable. On April 29th, it all came crashing down and claimed the lives of 70 to 90 people. It is still to this day Canada's most deadly landslide to ever occur in history, and was a horrible tragedy that can only remind us how fleeting life can be. I think the craziest part about this landslide as well is that it wasn't just miners who were killed. Their wives, their families, all of them died at the hands of the Frank slide. The remains of these bodies were never recovered either, as the damage from the slide was far too devastating. Where all of this happened is now a section of a town called Crow's Nest Pass, and over a century later, the ghosts of the dead still haunt the area. This place is somewhere where visitors have reported feeling very unsafe. They say that the overall feelings of uneasiness are almost too much to bear and that they have to leave. Cries, howls, screams, this can all be heard late at night as you're trying to sleep. Lanterns will be seen in the night walking around at the hands of unknown apparitions. It is basically a full ghost town of people who never deserved to die in the first place, all wanting to get a second just to feel their lives again as they were so unfairly ripped away from them. Definitely one of Canada's most horrific tragedies, and now home to one of its most haunted locations. Number 1 on this list is the Banff Springs Hotel. This hotel is located in Banff, Alberta, and is truly one of the creepiest places that I've ever read about. Now, first off, I want to note the hotel itself looks gorgeous on the outside. The beautiful nature it is surrounded by is stunning, and the hotel gives me some serious Harry Potter Hogwarts vibes. However, when I say that this place is surrounded by nature, I really mean it. It is totally out on its own, with no other buildings in sight at all. The secluded site has been around for 132 years and has housed its fair share of visitors. Some of these visitors have had some incredible stays. I mean, when you look it up online, the hotel has a 4.7 Google rating, so I mean, it's pretty freaking good. Some of the guests, though, they never checked out. In the 1920s, a couple was set to have their wedding at this hotel. On the day of the ceremony, though, the bride, while she was walking down one of the hotel's beautiful marble staircases, tripped and fell, smacking her head on her descent and dying on the spot. This bride's spirit is one of the most notable sightings people have had when they're staying at this hotel. It's said that they often see a phantom in a wedding dress ascending and descending the stairs very quickly. She's also been seen in the ballroom dancing alone, potentially dreaming of the dance that she wanted so desperately to have with the husband that she never got to marry. In 1975, a longtime bellman of the hotel, Sam, died there. Since then, sightings of Sam have been pretty consistent. One story details how 2 women lost their room key and called the front desk to go and get it. The front desk person sent someone to go and open their room for these ladies. When that person had got there, though, the ladies were already in the room and said that another bellman had let them in. They described Sam to a T when they spoke about the bellman who helped them out. Instances like this have occurred time and time again at the hotel, with many people believing his spirit is still working there. Finally, with this hotel, you have room 873. Room 873 is rumored to be the home of a gruesome murder. One evening, a family was staying there, and the father, for some unknown reason, lost his mind, murdering his family and himself. After completely refurbishing the room, the hotel put it back in service, but now people who have stayed there report hearing the screams and the cries as if they were still dying. If you have to stay at this hotel, definitely avoid room 873.